Good evening. We'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Regular meeting for Thursday, September 19th, 2024 at 5:30 to the Emmett Shockley Administration Building. Roll call of members, Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley.
Present.
Mr. Orozco.
Present.
Mr. Kroll, present.
Right, on to Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
On to approval of the agenda. Any changes?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, there's a correction that needs to be made to action item A. The students are traveling to Fort Carson, Colorado, not Fort Collins.
I'll move to approve the agenda with the correction described by Mrs. Chavez.
I'll second that.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley.
Yes.
Mr. Orozco.
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
All right. With that, on to public comment.
We're
Mr. Turner's running.
verifying that no one signed up. So, but we don't believe so. Let us just verify it real quick.
No,
No.
Yeah, okay,
we're good.
so we're on to reports.
On to solar presentation. Rocky Backus.
Yeah.
Backus.
Welcome back, Mr. Backus.
Go a certain place or?
You can come
You
here.
can come over here and just give us an update.
Put that right there.
Then it blocks the,
No, they're just thinking about.
then it blocks all the people we have to faces.
Let's see everybody's butt.
Yeah. We got a presentation? Yeah, I think they're just trying to pull it up.
Yeah, pulling up the presentation.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You would decide that, there we go.
How's that?
Great, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Board members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name's Rocky Backus. Want to give an update on the solar project and what's happened and where it's gone and so forth. The first cover is very similar to a presentation did a while back. Sunwell is still the finance group, but the contractor has been changed. And I'll go through the reason for that next. So Border Solar, I would call them they call it EPC in the industry. So they're more the coordinator, design, and so forth. They're not the actual contractor. The actual contractors that he's told me are JR Builders, Jim Reedy for the mechanical portion of it. Well, I guess structural to build the structures, and then Miguel Zuniga of M2 Squared Electric, which what I understand has done a lot of y'all's work and you're pleased with them. So they'll be the actual people pulling the permits, doing the work and so forth. And if you flip to the next one. Why has this project been delayed for quite a long time at this point? And what happened was that the interest rates very rapidly went up and over 100 residential solar companies closed over the last year. The residential that were focused on that, which included my company at the time, and we wound up having to shut down. I carried people longer than I should have perhaps and took a huge loss. And so now I'm a consultant on this and other groups and so forth. And I'll still be working with the people, but I no longer have a company, unfortunately. And so that's what happened. And we had to obtain another installer and rearrange the finance for them to agree to everything and move that forward. So if you go to the next slide. So Border Solar's been around since 2008. They're mainly based in El Paso. If you look at the top left picture, that's a system that's actually installed on El Paso Electric's building. So they've done work for them. The next one to the right is a carport. And then the one just below that is another carport that's on top of a roof, actually. If you don't look at it closely, you may not realize that that's also a carport. And then the one to the left is a very large utility scale one down in Mexico that they designed and built. So they've got a wide range of experience, been around a long time. And they won't be the persons turning the wrenches and all that, but they'll be working with the two contractors to make sure that they don't have experience in some of these areas, that he's there to make sure everything's done right and to oversee it and work with it. And the next. So the schedule now, Javier from Border Solar is the owner. He came and visited all of the sites and confirmed the installation details, which he's printing up new design sheets. I know there's one or two things that will have to get reconfirmed because there was a meter that was not where it was previously marked, or maybe utility moved it. I'm not sure on that. But we'll reconfirm all that. So they're resubmitting interconnection applications, which is the application to the utility to allow the solar to be connected. And then confirm the designs and locations with the Deming staff to make sure everybody's agreed that everything's either exactly what's before or anything needs to be modified slightly is done. Submit the permits, and he expects to break ground on all projects in 2024. I just talked with George briefly about when y'all's Christmas shutdown is. He said he would like to do all of the carports for the, I don't know if you still call them carports, but the covers of playgrounds, he would like to have done during that break, at least the structural part and so forth, when there's no kids there at all. And that's the timing he's headed for that, but he expects he will definitely have them all completed by April. So that the playground covers are done and you have that for the kids to be able to better use the playgrounds. And expects all projects to be completed in 2025. Next slide, please. E&M update. I have joined the committee at P&M as a independent for pricing going forward. And so some of this the local P&M representative may not even know this stuff, but I can tell you this is what's actually happening. So P&M increased prices effective January, which was on your electric bills. January 15th, that went into effect. The next price increase will happen in November. You'll see another increase in November. And in June, P&M filed for a 23% increase all at once. And that's to be effective in June of 25. So these are extremely unusually fast increases. And I'll be happy to answer questions on that if there would you'd like to know. But they're also projecting an additional 6% every year to 2 years after that. And the primary reason is because of the energy transition law that the state passed a couple of years ago. Another huge factor, which we worked with George on to reset thermostats, which appreciate the cooperation there. But peak for commercial was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. With the new rate structure, super off peak is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., which that's a total reversal. I mean, it's very strange, but that's projecting that New Mexico, at least for their territory, is going to go the way California's gone, and that that's the way they need to move people. Now, currently, that's an optional thing that you can join, which I think is very advantageous for the school district to join now. They have a statewide representative. His first name is John, Jon, and we've already had some discussions with Babs and him and other people to say, here are opportunities. And I'll come into that a little bit more later in the presentation. If you go to the next slide, please. So why would Deming spend $300,000 more for electricity in the next 18 months? It's because the rates are going to go up. You were spending about $1 million, 30% more is $300,000. So what that means is you'll save 300 more, because when you go solar, you're going to avoid those effective increases. So your savings will actually be much more than what we'd originally projected. And The portion that's kind of in green, 24 to 28, that's P&M's actual presentation to investors about what their construction is gonna be. And it's $1.3 billion over the next few years. So that's what's driving the cost up. When you're required to build huge amounts of solar, so either people go solar or they're gonna do it for you. It's not a question of are you gonna go solar, it's who do you wanna pay and how much? But that's driving the cost, and the rate case, which was filed in June, will be decided by next June. And then it'll go into effect, but the bad news is that residential is being hit heavily. Out of that 23% increase, they're asking residential to go up by 32% in one chunk. And I think it's not appropriate to then ask to give a 49% decrease to large commercial. But that's what they've proposed in order to bring more business into the state. But that means that residential and schools and others are subsidizing those other rates. And so I'll come back to something on that in a moment. Go to the next slide. Two of your schools are on Columbus Co-op. They had the highest effective rate when we did the analysis of them at over 17 cents that you were paying there on an average. And in May, rate 5, which is the rate your schools are on for Columbus, they went up 7.9% on the demand charge and 26% all in one chunk that effectively started happening in May of this year. Those are huge increases. If you talk to the Columbus folks, they're going to tell you that they really didn't have a choice because they're just a distributor of power. They buy their power from Tri-State, which is a large supplier to most of the co-ops. And Tri-State went up. And so they're just passing on their costs, but that's a huge cost increase. You go to the next slide. So this is what I call no cost enhancement. Now, I know that you'd have to pay for people to reset thermostats sometimes and some of that kind of stuff, but Georgia's already implemented they're setting the thermostats to better take advantage of the new rate structure. I don't think that we've had the rate structure requested yet, which needs to be done. And I will send another message to say, here are the ones you need to do. P&M is out of meters right now, so it won't happen before December anyway. But I strongly recommend going to the alternate rates, and it varies by class. You have 3 different rate structures with P&M now, depending on the size. And it's actually 4 because they do the smaller ones different depending on how big they are for the overproduction. We were able to get online monitoring for 2 of the schools, which has been there for a long time. It's just, we couldn't find out it was there until we got to a high enough level at P&M to find out, yes, they have 15-minute data on 2 schools. And one of them is the south part of the high school, and the other one is Red Mountain. And then because of the size of the main high school, they did change the meter about 6 weeks ago at our request so that we would start getting that data as well. And that data is available online. So I think that Babs has already logged into that to see that. I downloaded the data to do the analysis that we updated and did. And so then that's 1, 2, 3 items. Okay, number 4 on this no cost enhancement is sign on to the P&M Peak Saver programs. As a district, they will add controls for anywhere that you don't have controls now at no charge to the district. And they will pay you to participate in that program. And they'll tell you how much they will pay you and get that put together. So I strongly recommend that you agree to participate in that. Last year, there were 2 events in which they requested basically powering down to whatever commitment level you made. But those were between 5 and 10 p.m., which are not school hours anyway. And you always have control if you sign up to the programs, you can override. But if, for example, teacher was in a room and it had a thermostat controllable, it would change the setting in the thermostat, and if she was uncomfortable or he was uncomfortable, they could just go punch the button and override. And it's based on your total district, not just any, you have someone that needs to work late, that's not gonna affect all of the schools, that's just gonna affect probably one room. So I think it's very advantageous. And they do pay you for the participation and, excuse me, and they will come up with an amount based on evaluating all of your campuses. And, we've already done an initial meeting, Babs, myself, and John from P&M did that. And, I'm not sure who has the authority to authorize these things, but I would strongly recommend that whoever needs to authorize them so that we can send a message and say, yes, get us signed up and let's move to the next step. The fifth item is I'm requesting that you hire me for $1 a year to advocate for you in the rate case with P&M. I have an attorney that works with me. I've been doing rate cases for 40 years. 2 years ago on the El Paso Electric case, we took a $5 million increase and changed it into a $3 million a year decrease, saved the community $80 million. I'm highly experienced in it. And I want to make sure things don't change for solar programs in particular, because the utilities are profit driven and they will change the rates some point to try and make sure they're making the money they want to make. But I need a client that pays a P&M bill in order to intervene. So I request a $1 a year consulting contract if you'd be agreeable to that. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the scheduling demand. This is your actual data for September 11th, 2023, which was the highest usage day for that particular school. And by changing the thermostat settings and looking at the new peak demand charges, typically about 50 to 55% of your total electric bills are demand for the ones that have demand charge. And so that's a big deal. And what we suggested is to say, okay, and it changes by time of year. So the summer months, it's demand is only charged from 5 to 10 p.m. in the rate for that school. The rest of the year, it's 5 to 8 a.m. plus 5 to 8 p.m. So it's not a huge number of hours, but if you can avoid usage in those hours, the savings are huge. And that opens up more opportunities to do more of the schools that initially didn't pencil financially, and that's in the next page. But I conveyed this information to George and Babs so that they could see it and that use that to set the thermostats. And so you've been doing a good job of turning things off when you're gone, but demand is set by 15 minutes. So if you can turn it off before 5 o'clock instead of 15 minutes after 5 o'clock, that makes a huge difference in your bill. I am going to recommend in the next page, if you go to the next page. There are 6 of the sites that we believe we should add batteries to in order to better take care of addressing being able to remove peak, and we can substantially increase the savings. So they will save far more than they add in cost. And then we did not contract 3 of the schools, or not only 3 of the schools, 3 of the meters. And we would like to add those now, which would also have a substantial amount of batteries. Columbus Electric still has 24/7 demand charge, which I think should get changed, but that's going to take at least a year. We got their pricing sheet for Tri-State, who provides their power. Tri-State does not charge them a demand charge 24/7. It's just that historical meters, which they would read once a month, just had a dial that kind of went, so they wouldn't know when it happened. But with modern meters, it can tell you exactly when it happened, and record the data every 15 minutes. So that's something that I think can be changed. And for all of the schools, after 10 months, we recommend changing to a rate that does not have a demand charge at all. For P&M, if you're less than 50 kW of demand, or you're less, it's an or less than 15,000 kilowatt hours in a given month, then you drop to a different rate, which doesn't have a demand charge. And that's 10 out of 12 months. So if you mess up and have some big event in the evening that set a demand charge, if it's not more than twice a year that you mess up, it doesn't really have much effect. It will affect that much bill, but not kick you out of the rate. And so, that's my report to you. I would stand for any questions that you may have. And,
So with the solar projects themselves, we went from one company to another. Is that my understanding?
the company you contracted with did not change. But the contract that they used to have installed is what changed.
The sub.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? A lot of money that goes to just.
I
keeping
got a
lights on.
question. I thought the PRC or whatever it is, don't they get regulate all this? Or they
Yes.
just opened up the gate and said, charge whatever you want?
It is absolutely regulated. The filing that P&M did is over 5,000 pages. Very few people participate and look at any of it. And I've been doing this for 40 years in Texas, California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. My opinion is that they adjust the rates to whoever squeaks and give them the best deal, and then everybody else gets what they get. And if there's not someone there speaking to it, they don't really care. And there'll be a number of people that will go give public comment. And how can I say this nicely? It's wasted time. The law does not allow them to consider anything that wasn't sworn testimony. So public comment makes people feel good perhaps at the utility commission, but it does not count. They're not even allowed to look at it. So you have to be a party and file comments and do it under oath for it to count. And there's about I think it's 650% difference in the people that get the lowest prices and the highest prices in P&M territory. 630% difference. That is impossible to justify based on what it costs to produce the electricity, what it costs to transmit it, and what it costs to distribute it. It's just impossible to prove that. It just comes down to they cut deals, and there's at least 6 different one customer deals. You know, Facebook has a special deal, others have a special deal, and that's why I'm offering to advocate, because I think that it's unjust, it's wrong, but unless you officially do something about it, nothing will happen. And we've been very successful in getting things changed in other markets. This will be the first time for me to intervene in P&M's work, but they're being extremely responsive to your school district right now, partially because they're in a rate case. They're asking for a big increase, and a school district that says this isn't fair carries a whole lot more political impact than just an individual or something of that nature. I mean, a 32% increase for residential customers.
It's ridiculous.
If your bill was 200, it's going to be 260. That's a lot in 1 year. And they're going to break it into 2 half in May and 6 months later. But no, that is yes, the PRC does regulate it. They do have the authority. It must go through hearings and so forth. There is they call him a hearing examiner in New Mexico. Other places call him a judge, administrative law judge, but yeah, they go through that whole process and, well, as an example, UNM pays less than half the rate you do. There's no basis for them to pay less than half of what you do. And the only difference is they said, we need it, help us, whatever. Well, I don't think they need the help more than anybody else, but that's what got done. But you can only get that changed in a rate case, which is now. Any other questions?
Any questions on the board? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guess we should do that. Any dimming? Happening? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
On to consent agenda. Any changes there?
No.
No changes. I entertain a motion.
No, I move that we approve the consent agenda as listed on our agenda tonight.
Have a second. Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Present, a present. Well, I wasn't here to say present was. Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Excuse me, yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
On to action items. A, consideration of out-of-state travel for DHS JR OTC to attend Raiders meet in Fort Carson, I'm sorry, Colorado. That was a correction.
Yes.
I apologize.
And we have Sergeant First Class Stephanie Brown, Mr. President, members of the board, to share a little bit about that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President, member of the board, Superintendent Chavez. As she mentioned, I am retired Sergeant First Class Brown. I have with me currently our JRTC Battalion Commander, Sergeant Major. I am the instructor at JRTC for the Denton High School, and they will actually, I would like them to present, please. If you will allow that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President,
Yeah.
members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. I'm Battalion Commander Villaverde, and this is Sergeant Major Saker. We come upon you to ask for permission to go to Fort Carson, Colorado for Raider Meet. We would like to challenge ourselves and get out of our comfort zone and see how we perform in a different environment from where we are used to working. Thank you for your time, and I stay here for any questions you may have.
Where does I think it's great. Where does the expense come from? Does it come from the district to send?
We are utilizing our funds that we have raised at the activity center and through the school that we have.
Okay, great.
Explain to me what a Raiders meet is.
So it is a group of many teams and they come together to try and do a obstacle or do something that we are supposed to do and complete it as quickly and efficiently as possible to see which one is more proficient at it.
So you guys have been practicing. Good.
Do you have a lot of practice after school or do you do most of it during a class time?
Majority of it is after school.
That's what I figured, but I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Also move for out-of-state travel for the DHS JROTC to attend a Raiders meet in Fort Carson, Colorado, October the 3rd through the 7th.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, Mr. Kroll.
Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
I know you'll make us proud. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And you'll have to report when you get
Yeah, you'll
back.
have to tell us how it goes when you come back. Mr. President, members of the board, the next action item is our budget adjustment requests, and Ms. Doyle will review them.
Mr. President, Board Superintendent Chavez. What an impressive group of young men.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely hard act to follow.
Yes.
We'll give you a point.
My daughter is a Marine, so.
Oh,
So before you, you do have a number of budget adjustments. The good news is that the majority of them are more money, so I'm happy to present that. The first one, number 11, is our SEG adjustment. If you'll remember, when we presented the budget, we presented it with a specific unit value with the understanding that we would be getting an adjustment based on an increased unit value. The adjustment that we received is actually 1.15 million. And you'll notice all of this is going into the instruction function for special education teachers as well as teachers. So all of this money that we received, additional money, will be going in the classroom. So that's an increase to our SEG. Number 12 is our initial allocation for our career technical award allocation. And this is just something that a grant that the high school receives from the state. There's actually a federal and a state portion. This is the state portion. I think I saw both Gasper and Nelson here. If there's any questions on that. Then number 14 is our food. It's a food initiative to produce locally sourced products that we receive. That's also a state grant. That's an increase. And then we have a new grant for Student Success Initiative. It's $95,000 that Mr. Wyman will be managing. Number 16 is Family Income Index. We're just moving money from software to PD so that we can do some PD for students on student behavior. Number 17 is the grads allocation. It's $14,000 for the program that actually Ms. Chung presented on. I believe it was last board meeting. And this is the funding associated with that program. Then number 18 is to move money for our Title I into professional development. And number 19 is this is a transfer bar where we're actually moving money to cover costs for we did some stipends for training for our employees for Vector to ensure that they all received the required trainings. And this is to move money into there, as well as there is a community member that's monitoring our football games, and we need to move money to pay for that as well. Then number 20 is Title I, and this is just as the year began and we started to see all of the different effects of raises and insurance coverage is changing and things like that. This is just to adjust to those salaries and benefits. And then finally, number 21 is our ARC transfer. This is the one that you did receive. There's a small adjustment, about $1,800 plus or minus on that one. This is primarily to move money for the additional compensation for the stipends that you guys had approved in the initial budget back in May. And with that, I'm standing for any questions.
The CTE program, there's a plus of 140,000 ballpark. No.
What number is that?
Number 12,
Number 12.
Yes.
It is
it's a plus of 140.
The initial, we were not able to initially get the budget done in time because we didn't have our allocation.
Mhm.
So this is the initial.
Oh, okay, so this is what we get.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not an increase. Well, it's an increase from 0, I guess.
It's a good way to look at it.
We had nothing. Now we have 100.
Yeah, you got nothing in your pocket, now you got 148. It's pretty good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions by the board? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the budget adjustment request presented by Ms. Doyle.
I'll second.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
With that, on to item C, consideration of permanent cash transfer from Fund 28,190 to Fund 28,189. Mrs. Doyle.
Mr. Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. There is a permanent cash transfer that I am requesting. What happened in this situation is we have two different grads accounts. We have one for our early childhood, and then we have our childcare, and then we have one at the high school. It was all written on one check. We deposited into one fund, and now we need to move some of it to the correct fund. Normally, we'd be able to do this without coming to you for approval, but it happened last year and we received the check this year, so we can't make adjustments to prior year.
Any questions with that? Now I entertain a motion.
I'll move the consideration of permanent cash transfer for Fund 28190 to Fund 28189.
Second,
Second.
Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
And with that, on to item D, consideration of budget adjustment, number 13, school buses. 0029 IB and approval of special education bus purchase through Fund 27178 Capital Appropriation Project Agreement. Superintendent Chavez.
And I believe you have a bar as well.
Yes.
Correct?
That
So
is
I'll just speak to the purchase of it. You have the grant agreement or contract agreement from the state that allows us to replace special education buses. And we were allocated to replace one district-owned bus that our contractors use. No, this is our bus. Okay.
It's an
Sorry.
early replacement.
It's an early replacement award. And then we have the bar to go with it.
Yes, ma'am. The bar is $147,000. And so we will make the purchase of the bus and then PED will reimburse us for that.
What do we do with our old bus? This is a replacement, correct? What do we do with the old bus?
We would go ahead and put it out for replacement, just like we do all of our other buses. We put it out for auction, or we could utilize it as a spare for the last remaining couple of years that we have, but typically we turn that back over to the state. And so we'll kind of see where they want us to go with that.
Questions? Comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move for budget adjustment number 13, school buses 00291B, IB, is it IB, and approval of special education bus purchase through Fund 27178 Capital Appropriation Project Agreement.
Have a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Okay, with that, on to item E,
Yes.
consideration and approval of joint powers agreement with the New Mexico School for the Blind and Visually Impaired 2024 through 2028. Mr. Sines.
President Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, I sent for you for a joint agreement between the New Mexico School of Blind, Visually Impaired and Living Public Schools. I've been working on this probably since last May. We did have somebody that was providing some services for one of our students who was receiving Braille and orientation and mobility. But she was coming out of Silver and she said, I can't do that anymore because I got kids that have been identified. So she kind of got me into getting with the School of the Blind. I've been calling them all summer. Finally, we found somebody right now that can come and provide some services. And so we're looking to go ahead and do some catch up because we got some compensatory services we got to catch up with, but to go ahead and provide some services. Another student moved in May and is also going to need some services as well. We have another one that is still pending an evaluation evaluation through them, which probably will also be some services. So we've got some services. We have
We have a total of 3 students right now we're servicing.
3, possibly 4, but we're working with the parents to see if parents are still kind of hesitant to move forward. So
Any questions by the board? Comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move then,
Okay, do I have a second?
number,
I'll second that.
Mr. Crowe?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Science.
Thank you, Mr. Song.
On to F, consideration of memorandum of understanding with the city of Deming for school resource officers. Mr. Parker.
Good evening, President Roscoe, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. I stand before you for back-to-back items, items F and G. In front of you is our annual renewal of our MOU to continue our SRO program. More specifically, the first one we're looking at is for the city of Deming. Pretty much the only thing that are changing are some amounts that are more specific. The city of Deming has updated us with salaries and benefits costs. The SRO agreement that we have, the agreement in general is 50% of the shared cost to provide SROs in their schools. And so you'll see that for that, we're anticipating 86,004 that we'll be spending the 50% amount. And then also not to exceed $3,000 would be invoiced for training specifically for that. All other parts of the agreement are unchanged from the years past. So all the other stipulations are as such the only amounts that have changed.
Have we had trouble getting school resource officers?
Not from the city.
Not from the city.
Not from the city. I definitely stand before you having friends and family that are in law enforcement. It is difficult to be in law enforcement, so we're very, very happy that the city continues to partner with us and provide those to us. And so as of right now, we're able to do that. We do have, as we go to the next item, we are experiencing some challenges with the county on that. And we may need to explore expanding the city option on that as we go through to make sure that we can maintain those numbers and hopefully in the future, through other resources, expand those so we can have even more. But right now, that's where we're looking at for 2 resource officers through the city as of right now.
I didn't mean to mean that negative, I was just asking.
No, it's just a reality out there. It's tough to be in education, tough to be in law enforcement. So really recruiting that and having those partnerships, I think, is very important for people who are wanting to go in law enforcement to see that positive potential collaboration, and it's tough out there.
Yeah, that's,
It's on the agreements in both of them, because they're basically identical, that the SROs could potentially teach students certain subjects. Is that something that the district is utilizing right now, or have we ever?
We have, they've actually provided some of our DARE instructions to all of our students in 5th grade. You know, we hope to expand that, although they are very, very busy. And so that they have the ability to do that. They also provide just general knowledge and counseling to small groups, to classrooms. They're definitely invited to speak to students at any given time.
Yes,
And a lot of our schools utilize them in that nature.
yes.
Okay, but as far as the way that I understood the agreements to be written was that they could be teaching a class on a regular basis. That's not something that we're doing right now.
Not right now. Eventually, we kick off the DARE program. That would be a regular once a month or every other week kind of class that we would teach for a select group.
Mr. Roscoe, I can remember when we were in the schools and it was really also a way of children who are fearful or something is happening outside of school to become friends enough that, I don't know if friends is the word, but they feel free to talk to them and tell them if there's something that's really hard for them happening either at home in this town, wherever. That helped a lot of children outside of just that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments by the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the city of Deming for school resource officers.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Crowe?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron?
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
With that, thank you, Mr. Parker. With that, on to item G, consideration of memorandum of understanding with Luna County for school resource officers.
So for item G, it is the exact same agreement, more specifically with the Luna County Sheriff's Department. We're looking at a flat fee of $36,212. And then half of the charges basically that they could bill us for training is $1,500. This is only providing us one SRO at this time through the county. We're still waiting to see if that can possibly change. If that doesn't change, we may be going back to the city and seeing if they could spare another SRO, and then we would shift that cost over to the city agreement as well. We've just not explored that as of yet. We're getting these off the ground first.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to explore that because I think
Yeah.
it's very minimum another one. Whether that comes from the city or whether that comes from the
I
county.
mean, I see that SRO, they're going to Columbus and then just getting the city to annex whatever buildings we need to annex to put them in the city and be that much.
I completely agree. Having only 3 SROs for a county and the service that we have, the distance itself is a challenge. And so we can definitely get that going. We will reach out. We've not heard back just yet, and so we're giving them another opportunity from the county to see if that's even plausible. We're happy that this happened because we weren't sure we were even gonna get one. So at one point, we were looking at, there was not gonna be one provided. And
Did
so
they
we're
give you
happy to
a
have one
reason why they don't want to provide?
Manpower.
They don't have the
Manpower.
manpower.
manpower. And I believe also law enforcement units are competing for the same law enforcement officer state, trying to compete and recruit. And so they're trying to have a pool. So really the ideal solution is having more of our young people who are interested in going to law enforcement and encouraging that. And once again, putting this positive spin, building relationships with kids, and it's not an us and them kind of approach to things. It's definitely a we. That is part of the solution. SROs, I believe, are an important part of creating that.
Any other questions by the board? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move for the memorandum of understanding with Luna County for school resource officers.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. That on to item H, consideration of resolution for disposal of miscellaneous items. Mr. Wertz.
Good evening, President Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. I'm just here on the never-ending quest to try to get rid of the stuff that comes back to us. We just, we get rid of everything and we turn around and it's all full again. And so we just have a lot of older student desks, student chairs, office chairs, computer tables. You can see the list. It just goes on. And we've probably doubled that list since I submitted that list for approval.
I see the old piano at Smith School. Doesn't it look like the one, Ms. Chavez?
Possibly. I was gonna say it's still I think it's still in Smith.
Yeah.
Because I think I played it.
I mean, it really, when I saw that, I thought, that's Smith School.
Have any questions about it? Concerns?
Questions, comments? None, I'll entertain a motion.
I would have,
I'll move to approve the resolution for disposal of miscellaneous items.
Have a second.
I'll second one.
Motion and a second, Mr. Kroll.
Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Mr. Wertz, don't go anywhere.
You're very popular tonight.
On to item I, consideration of preventative maintenance plan SY 24-25.
President Roscoe, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. It's September. It's time for me to be here to present this. I've done it for, I think this is number 6 or 7 now. I don't know. Our maintenance plan is what kind of guides our department. It has multiple benefits. It allows us to get funding through the state. And having a current one of these gives us points when we get our grading, our FMARs from the state. I think there's 10 points that can raise that grade, and so it's a kind of a critical piece. We haven't made a ton of adjustments. There's some minor adjustments on it, some things added, but not a lot of adjustments this year. We're still working on trying to get a solid energy plan down, and that's gonna probably be the biggest adjustment that's gonna happen this year. We have a new energy manager who's working on it, and we're just trying to get some things in place, and some part of that solar presentation and understanding exactly where being charged is a big part of that. So this, it's pretty common. This is something that we've been doing for a lot of years, and like I say, it's not much has changed.
Question by the board? I want to tell you, thank you so much, because it was a nice presentation. Everything you have it organized, put together, it's pretty good. It's A1.
I agree. It was really nice as a new board member who doesn't really know a whole lot about the way each department is run to get your whole folder. Like, it was really well organized, and I don't have any questions because you put everything in there.
There is a lot of information.
Is there, do you guys, you said talk about a rating, where is that rating at in terms of the scale, and where do we sit?
We're probably averaging, when they come and visit our schools, they give a grade, 0 through 100. The state has been increasing as a whole. They've been down in the 60s and slowly up in the 70s, and I think the state average is about 76. On the average, we're probably, I'm gonna say upper 80s, 88s.
Yes.
On the average, I don't think I've had a school in the 70s.
No.
At all.
We have it.
Oh,
And so, and the state gives us the opportunity to fix that through work orders. We haven't really pursued that a whole lot, just to get the grade higher and higher and higher, but
yeah,
we're up in the upper tier of the districts as far as that grade is coming in and grading the condition of the schools.
it says a lot. That says a lot.
Yes.
About you and your work and your crews.
If I want to toot his horn just a little bit, scores of 80 and above for districts, that is amazing.
It is.
How many are in your department?
60s, 50s.
You're probably one of the top in the state, Mr.
It's
We're up there, yes.
How many are in your department?
Right now we have 27.
They don't have time to slow down, do they?
Well, thank you for the work that you do. It's obvious, it's paying off. So, any questions or comments by the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Consideration, the preventive I move, the preventive maintenance plan SY 24-25.
Okay, a second. I'll second that. Roll. Yes, sir. Mrs. Cameron.
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron.
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe? Yes. Mr. Crowe, yes. Thank you, Mr. Wertz, and on to the next one. Consideration of memorandum of understanding for SY 24-25 with Deming Cesar Chavez High School for maintenance.
I'm just trying to get all this done.
We're gonna think of something to bring you back.
So here again, President Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, this is the memorandum of understanding between us and Cesar Chavez Charter. Literally nothing has changed in this. We haven't had a reason to in 6 years. Everything works good. They have issues, they put in work orders, we go fix, and they either pay or it comes out of the 2% that we hold. So it's really been working well, and we didn't see any reason to change it.
It's good.
Questions by the board? Comments?
How old is that school?
Ancient?
Yeah.
My age, is that what you're trying to say?
I don't know. It's
42,
really old.
I think
It's,
is when it was
yeah.
built.
And honestly, some of the infrastructure is starting to fail, and so we're gonna have to start having some conversations about
How?
that. we think some sewer lines have collapsed and it's old, it's showing its age.
I'll entertain a motion.
To approve the memorandum of understanding for school year 24-25 with Deming Cesar Chavez Charter High School for maintenance.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
yes,
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wertz. I think you're done.
Thank you so much.
On to item K, consideration and approval of purchase and adoption of new curriculum for career and technical education programs, Mrs. Reinhardt and Mr. Diaz.
Good evening, Mr. Orozco, President Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. We stand before you tonight to ask for your approval for the purchase and adoption for CTE, new curriculum for our CTE programs at Red Mountain Middle School and Deming High School. And I have Mr. Lozano and Mr. Diaz here to also stand for questions.
You guys have any questions? So this curriculum here will last a couple of years, huh?
Seven.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
and what groups get this? Or do all our students or people select?
Career tech. It's all for our career tech programs.
Okay, none of the other,
No, this isn't like math or like, it was an adoption year for CTE only.
okay,
Just
So-
a correction on that. So part of it, they will, we do have our WIN,
That's
WIN curriculum, so all students will benefit from the WIN curriculum as well. And there's a WIN curriculum, careers exploration for the 9th and 10th, and then the 11, 12 is more like soft skills, things that they would need, after leaving.
So will you explain what WIN is?
Oh, I will give that.
Thank you. So,
This
WIN
is something new.
stands for, what I need. It's an acronym. So we implemented for several reasons. Right now, at a basic level, students are addressing, grades, attendance, phone calls with teachers once a week on Wednesdays. And right now we established it by cohort. As we progress with like student data and assessments, we're trying to see if we can move some of those cohorts. The first one we've moved already was with Ingenuity. We noticed Ingenuity credit recovery, students without teacher per se, at least directing them once a week, we're having issues. So every student that has an Ingenuity class now is paired up with the WIN teacher for that course specifically to address it as a facilitator. As we move on, like for next year, for example, when we get data for students that are deficient in a certain area, like let's say math or reading, we can pair those students up in cohorts with the strength of a teacher that's either in math or reading as well. So we're gonna try to see if we can hit those foundational levels to get what we used to call the bubble kids that are borderline proficiency and move them up. But also, like he stated, we do have curriculum for our 9th and 10th for skill development as well. So we're trying to hit every group, but it's a progression, maybe a couple of years when it's more settled by individual student. Thus the acronym, what I need, for each individual student.
And as far as the curriculum goes, we're buying everything that we need. We're not leaving anything out. We're not set to attach anything else later. We're not, what we have is what we need, and we're not gonna be, they're not offering something else that we
Yeah, no,
need
we're
right
not, we're
now.
not adding anything to it. And then for our career tech classes, we have 8 main programs that are, and what I mean by 8 main programs, those are programs that are tiered from level 1 all the way to 3, which include, welding, carpentry, engineering, culinary, nursing, and media as well, which has been one of our newer programs that's been successful. And then we have about 2 programs that are not programs, it could be, that we've introduced just like single classes as electives, which include our criminal justice course with Mr. Mendoza, and then a single business course with Ms. Jaramillo. So 8 main programs and then a couple of individual courses. And I know recently the state did include ROTC as part of the career tech umbrella. So we're kind of looking at that and see how that's going to fit within the programs as well.
Questions or comments by the board?
I just think it's great that we have a variety of choices rather than everyone in a certain hole.
Nothing else? I'd entertain a motion.
I will move approval of the purchase and adoption of new curriculum for career and technical education programs.
No second.
Also,
Mr. Kroll?
Sir, Mr. Mrs. Crumley,
yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes,
Mr. Crow, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item L, consideration of general member agreement and resolution for the same with the SWNM Council of Governments 2024 to 2025. Mr. Turner?
Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. This is an annual agreement for the district to be a part of the Council of Governments. Our utilization of the Council of Governments, it's how we get our junior money. Our legislators give it to the COG, and then we go through the process. Most recently, you all agreed to, or were told about the mariachi outfits, and that's how we got it. So I stand for any other questions.
Question none? Comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move consideration of general member agreement and resolution for the same with the Southwest New Mexico Council of Governments 2024-2025.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Kroll?
Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes,
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Crow, yes.
Thank you. On to item M, consideration of policy revisions for J-0650 student admissions and J-1000 admission of homeless students. Mr. Turner?
Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, this is just finalizing the changes to the policies that we reviewed last month. We did provide new language for what would be necessary to verify a school boundary in the student admissions policy, and in the admissions of homeless students. We changed where it said chief executive officer to just state superintendent to avoid confusion. And I stand for any questions.
Questions on that?
there's probably, it's may have been said today, how many do we have homeless? What, approximately?
McKinney, Vento is right around 300. 260 to 300.
Any other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the policy revisions for J-0650 student admissions and J-1000 admission of homeless students.
Second,
Second,
Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
yes,
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Crow,
Yes.
On to N,
Yeah,
consideration of acceptance of parent advisory committees for schools SY 24-25. Superintendent Chavez.
yes. So, Mr. President, members of the board, in addition to the packet that was published are the letters from each of the schools identifying the individuals who have agreed to be part of the parent advisory committees, which are public meetings that the schools are inviting all families to attend, but I stand for any questions. And I believe every school has submitted theirs. Yes, we have every single one.
Questions by the board, comments?
I know we have the advisory committees. Do we ever, at the end of this school year or end of a semester, kind of a report, not maybe oral report, but what is happening?
So that's what our community input sessions will be. Last month was Bell. And then we'll keep rotating through, but that would be the perfect opportunity to include that in their presentation of what their PAC is working on.
Thank you.
They do have a requirement of what they present. So they were starting with budgets. Where does the money get spent? It's not like just a PTO meeting where we're looking for fundraisers and activities, but it's very specific to the things at that school and how they spend their money, how they allocate their money, instructional programs, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We need to make a,
Yes,
Take a
we
vote on
need
that?
you to accept them, approve them.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve or accept the parent advisory committees for schools for school year 24-25.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, Mr. Kroll.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
All right, with that, on to item O, consideration and assignment of board members to the evaluation committee.
That's you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. President.
We'll entertain it. Is it nominations then we have to make? So somebody got to make a nomination to consideration for the evaluation committee. Any nominations?
Evaluation for,
Superintendent.
I nominate Mrs. Crumley.
Else? So do we need a motion,
You know what,
a second for that?
Mrs.
we can do.
Olivia wanted to be on it, so
Okay.
I nominate Mrs.
Olivia,
Olivia.
Both of them?
Both of them.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, that's exactly what the attorney had said, in order to prevent a quorum, that there be two board members that serve on that, right?
so we got two. Any other nominations? None, then
Let's call for a second.
A second? have a second for that?
I move that we close the nominations and second the
Okay.
nominations.
Mr. Crowe?
Sir, Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
On to number 9, superintendent's report.
Our first report, Mr. Kroll had requested just an update on badges, student badges, how they're used. And Mr. Parker was going to just give an update and answer any questions you might still have. And if there's any additional information you're wanting, we can also find that out.
So, good evening, President Roscoe, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. So where we are with the student badges is pretty sporadic, to be perfectly honest. They've been used in a variety of different ways, and then issued in a lot of that has been depending on our partners, whoever taking pictures for students, right? When you get that notification, says you want to buy pictures of your student, we use those pictures a lot of the times to not only make our badges, but to upload to Infinite Campus. And depending on what that schedule works, sometimes it works in our favor, sometimes it takes a while to get those done. And in fact, we're still in the process right now of scheduling pictures for elementary school sites and our secondary school sites. So that's kind of where we're at right now. What I'm proposing that we're going to be moving for is more of a controlled product on that, where the district is going to take ownership of the initial pictures for every single student. So we're looking at equipment purchases for the schools so they can take pictures of students. It's just a badge picture and basically an Infinite Campus picture for our student information system. And that can be done at the beginning of the year, so that way we can kind of get these turned around pretty quick. So that's the first main component that we're proposing.
May I add to that high school has always done it that way, which is why they're able to issue their badges so quickly, is that they actually do their pictures.
Absolutely, and that's actually, we're taking some of that model from the high school. The second component that we're looking at is going to an RFID reading badge for every single student. All of our staff are already starting to get RFID pieces, which make touchless kind of access points, basically access for buildings, right? It's entry access, you can control where that is. We're gonna be moving to that piece because the other purchase we're making are RFID readers that tie to our information system. So what that allows is the teacher to connect that device to their computer to Infinite Campus, and the student, instead of the teacher manually taking attendance, the student can come, touch the thing, and then they're present for the day. If they leave that classroom, they can touch it, and then they leave the classroom. They come into the building, they touch that as well, and we're able to track students, and it's a much more seamless component rather than basically input or errors from whoever the user is. That also allows us to kind of do a better job of tracking where students are at any given time. But as we begin to expand that, we'll be able to look at how they check in for the nurse, how they check out, possibly even to go use the restroom, so we can check out how long are they taking to be out. In most cases, it's not to really track students, so to speak, but it becomes a safety issue. We know a student has tapped out and they've been gone to the bathroom for 15 minutes. Where different systems we can do to put that in. Along with that, Mr. Glickler is going to be applying for E-rate funds that allow us to put wireless internet on our buses. What that allows us to do is to create an infinite campus portal on our buses, mobile, that allows students also to get on the bus, tap that, we know those students are on the bus. When they get off the bus, they tap that, so we know at any given point, what students ride on the bus in the morning, what students exit in there. So that's kind of where we're going, to the point where that's issued. The challenge that we're gonna be running to is how often do we issue those badges? The RFID readers for students are not as expensive as the ones for staff, but there is a little bit of an increased cost that we'll be looking at what that is as a district. I imagine it's gonna be an increased cost of about $1.50 per student per year to use the RFID readers for all students. The other thing we're gonna be looking at is where do we implement those touch components? Is it appropriate for kinders to do that? How do we start to work our students up so that they're able to kind of touch point for different points on that in the district? So that's kind of where we're at right now and where we're hoping to go in the next year, year and a half. We do have the RFID readers on order. Once those come in, we're going to be selecting a pilot school that is willing to kind of jump on board and see what part of the system works and what doesn't. So once they come on board, we're going to be looking at any of our schools that are willing to partner this and to try it out.
I got a question. So we were using them last year, but we're not using them this year, basically. So nobody's using them.
The badges or
The badges to go in, because that's, I
On the
remember
buses.
my son taking, not on the buses in the schools,
Mhm.
where they would have to check in every day, you know. He would always remember, Dad, remember I need to get my badge and all that. So we're not using that no more.
I think we're using it at one side. I think it's still being used.
And why haven't we continued using it because we don't have the pictures? Is that what it is? Or-
Some of it is pictures, some of it is just the ease of use and the implementation to kind of make that a larger.
But if we were using it the previous year, why aren't we using it this year?
It wasn't successfully being used. That was part of the problem with it, is that most of the elementary kids really struggled to keep track of their badges. And the idea initially was using the badges for the buses to ensure they were on. And the check-in has become a major issue because it requires a physical person to be doing it. And it fell apart pretty quickly with
There's
that.
the
We didn't understand.
RFID readers are much more seamless because the ones right now that we're using are basically scan. Right, so it's a barcode scan. This one would be a lot more easier for our students to do and our staff to manage.
Yeah.
The students could just walk by, they can just touch them as they go, rather than holding it deep and then for it to generate that data.
And I understand all the issues.
Mhm.
My dilemma is that we purchase equipment that we don't use.
Mhm.
And we're gonna be discussing something about safety, I guess. And this could be used for safety, period.
Mhm.
And so the only thing that I say is before we start implementing new things for safety, we need to utilize the things that we do have
Mhm.
for safety or for other things before we start adding things, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I see it. I mean,
There's someone that wants to
we-
speak back there.
it's beneficial either way. If we're gonna do it, let's do it 100%, especially if we bought the things. And if not, we're not. I mean, I'm not opposed to it either, if that's not what we're gonna do, but we start adding things and then we add something and then we don't do it and then it sits around and
Mhm.
that's.
So
No, I agree.
it sounds like the goal that you've just described is to replace the system we have entirely?
Well, the system we have, it has gaps. We don't have that in every single classroom, right? So right now it is really on the entry points to the school. And so that's a secondary, for example, same thing. I have some handheld units, but we don't have those for every single classroom. And so we will be replacing those, for the handhelds that we have, that are the scanners and things like that have to be tied to a machine. But yeah, we're not looking, the passive implementation wasn't full scale like we're describing right now. This one will have one in every single classroom, in the front offices, extra ones that we'll probably use for our security measures that hopefully as we start to expand as well. There are some larger scale components that are really interesting. to use, where if every student has RFID readers, they have RFID readers that will read a room with 1,800 kids in one snap. It'll take a picture of the entire room and tell you what kids' badges are in that room right at that point.
Wow.
There's our large scale RFID readers that you're able to kind of do. That's kind of futuristic down the road, but we don't have that equipment. We have limited equipment right now. So we're looking to get equipment that's easier to use and then easier to implement from the user end of it. And then the student end of it as well, without having to stop. It's like touchless.
So other than knowing where kids are at any given point in time, are there any other benefits to this sort of system? Other than just knowing where people are by numbers?
Well, it would be attendance, and then obviously if somebody.
It's also bathroom passes. So one of the things they can keep track of now would be able to keep track of us. Our student information system has the capability to put parameters around bathroom passes. So when kids leave a classroom, we can immediately track that. We can put time on it. Not that we're thinking we could do that, but a lot of the core decisions that are made are in unsupervised areas like bathrooms, and it's hard. The cameras can't always capture it. And this will we'll be able to pull, administration will be able to see who's been out of the bathroom at this time period or out of their classroom and during certain time periods if something were to happen
So
in
it just helps with investigating.
it does that as well. I don't know if you want to call on.
Mrs. Meck, did you have
So
something?
I just wanted to say right now, we are using the old system for after-school program.
Right.
It's helping to tally meals, different things like that to order for food and monitor our after-school programs. And so in that aspect, it's a little more manageable than
The whole school, right?
Mr. Lozano, Justin?
Did you have something?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say for the high school, secondary, what we've learned was the scanners at the front entrance and back entrance are useful just for the purposes of knowing if a kid made it on campus, but that was about it. So it's gonna be really useful if we do go into the classroom, because what happens is also in the front of the building, when we get parents would drop off kids like at 8:20. That's when class starts. So what we were having them do is scan in the front, but what happens is kids notice right away that we're already being counted tardy. So it takes the autonomy away from the teacher and the responsibility. And high school kids, once they figured out they were tardy, from the front office to the classroom, they could walk around and they wouldn't even show up to class and it was marking them as tardy. So that's some of the gaps that we found, but the usefulness is gonna come from the classroom ones, because what happens there is student walks in and like Ms. Chavez had explained to us, it's gonna count the actual minutes of when they're in class, but also track record of if a kid in the span of 5 periods in the restroom 4 out of those 5 for 5-10 minutes. It's gonna give us an idea of how much instructional time these students are leaving for investigational purposes as well too. We're having a lot of issues in bathrooms, and we obviously don't have cameras in there like it was stated, but tracking those individual students of how long they're leaving for what periods of time, but also not taking that responsibility away from the teacher, that when they see them scan in, whatever time that is, it's gonna also save time for the teacher instead of worrying about if that kid made it from the front office all the way to the classroom. So, I mean, we did learn a lot from that system, but once we did like, what is the goal? That was the question that I had too. What is the goal of the system? If it is in each individual classroom and nurses, that's gonna help us a lot with the traffic and keeping track. And it gives us administration firepower when a student comes in and says, well, I was just in the bathroom for 10 minutes and I look at it and I can tell what, but you did it for the last 3 periods and it's like you've been an hour out for an entire day. So it should, in theory, help out.
You'd be able to coincide like the vape detectors going off and then kids being out of the bathroom or kids being out of the classroom. And now you can narrow down your potential list of people that
are.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's where we are with the student IDs and how they're tied to our information system for safety, attendance, and everything that comes along with that.
Anything further?
No.
Any other questions, comments?
Once we get it up and going, we'll be glad to kind of bring in, kind of demonstrate what that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Once we try to find a pilot school we're looking forward to really seeing that, and we're really looking for that on the buses as well. My Infinite Campus has a module that they're able to kind of roll out, they think in a year, but there are options for us if we can get this going. And I've been brainstorming with Sarah Kroll on how we could possibly create an AM and PM bus runs and then tie kids to those rosters and see exactly who's where they need to be, which is really, really good for parents and making sure that, we do have little ones who fall asleep on the bus, right? And sometimes that is part of the check. You'd be able to see is that student actually boarded, or sometimes they get sneaky and they want to board the wrong bus if they're the older kids. It'll immediately populate a roster. And on trips and things like that, we can see exactly who's on that bus. So we're looking forward to it.
Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B is our safety team, Mr. Hasso and Brandon. I'm sorry, I was gonna say Mr. Brandon, but I know that's not your last name.
They should didn't give him a new name.
Right, so we've been presenting some ideas around clear bag policy. You go to a concert, you go to any games in other towns, and those you're required to have a clear bag or no bag, and also metal detector. So they're gonna just give you a report and get feedback, because this is really about, we've presented to admin, we've presented to community input meeting. We're just our law enforcement partners trying to get feedback so that implementation is done well. So I'll let you guys.
President Roscoe, Board, Superintendent Chavez. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Mr. Kayana. I don't know if everybody's met him. He is the new Assistant Director at the Safety Department. He's been with us since middle of July. So we hit the ground running with everything that's been happening. It's been a busy year already. Thank you for the approving the SRO contracts. I mean, they're just such a great resource for us. But with that, we've been working on a lot of different items. Some of the ones that you're seeing right now and a few others, we've been working with Mr. Parker and the scanners and IDs and moving forward with these RFID cards has been so nice. I mean, we're able to control entry into our school sites. Again, having secure vestibules is another thing. We were at Bell this afternoon. They're almost complete with the install there. And then they were gonna move back to Chaparral, so we're getting a lot done. With that, I'm gonna let Mr. Carrera start with his presentation.
Well, good evening, President Orozco, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. Like Mr. Osso said, I am a fairly new employee to the district. It doesn't feel like it because it has been nonstop since we started, but like Superintendent Chavez touched on, we have talked about this quite a few times, both to the community and to our administrators. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a recap, but also give you guys a little bit of a kind of an understanding contextually where we're at with the safety and security program, at least for this school year since I've come on board. So I'll start off, I stand before you today. It's only been about 15 days that have elapsed since the Appalachia High School shooting in Central Georgia. Goes without saying, probably a pretty tragic incident that occurred. 2 students lost their lives, 2 staff members lost their lives. Thankfully, with that school shooting, there were 2 school resource officers assigned to that high school that were able to respond immediately, confront the shooter, and prevent any further loss of life. With that being said, immediately following that was September 4th, September 6th, another shooting occurred in Maryland in which a 16-year-old boy lost his life at the hand of another student. And a few days later, September 10th, in Omaha, Nebraska, another student was shot in the classroom. So this is an alarming trend that unfortunately I believe in today's society we're becoming more and more desensitized to. A little bit closer to home, before you guys, as far as the proposal as well as the presentation, just a quick snapshot for the 2023 school year. The New Mexico Public Education Department has actually put out some statistics. They've stated that there are 302 school-related violence with a weapon incidents throughout the state. Now that's anything from having a firearm on the campus, replica firearms, knives, everything you can think of. That's 302 incidents statewide. That's a 15% increase from the previous year, and those numbers are only continuing to grow. What's even more concerning is some of the data that's come back from survey responses from school administrators throughout the state, is that anywhere from 48 to 50% of school administrators feel that there's a significant concern for weapons coming into their school sites. I think with all that being said, it really is a stark reminder about the challenges that we face as educators at the administration level, as parents, as far as keeping our schools safe for our students and staff. We're gonna run through this presentation. Bottom line up front, this is something we've been working on. We're requesting at least some feedback from you guys tonight as far as the implementation of what we think is gonna be Deming Public Schools' response to some of these issues. Obviously, we learned specifically with Appalachia, there was 26 panic alarm activations at that school. And bad things still happened, students and teachers still lost their lives. So unfortunately, this is a topic in which we can do everything right and still have a bad day. So with that being said, like Mr. Hossel said previously, I believe this is DPS's attempt to continue to add, I like to call the safety and security onion, just another layer of school safety measures that we can take in place. So we are gonna ask at least tonight that you guys consider and give some feedback regarding the implementation of walk-through metal detectors and a clear bag policy. And I use the word policy kind of lightly because I don't necessarily know if that's the right word. I consider it to be more of a culture change piece, right? These are things that are happening throughout the country. This is a nationwide standard. Like Mr. Hasso said, if you go to a NMSU graduation, you go to an El Paso Chihuahuas game, you go to any big mixed sporting event, large gathering throughout the nation, you're starting to see these clear bag policies as well as these metal detectors. And as we go to this presentation, you guys will clearly see that a lot of the data supports that these are successful. So that's going to be tonight's intention. Next slide. So first and foremost, I want to kind of talk about some of the things that we're doing here within the Safety and Security Department. Before I came on board here, I tell Mr. Hasso, I truly did come into this position because I was impressed with the safety program that he's had over the years. So just to talk about some of the things we've been doing, I know a lot of people have touched on a couple of these things. School site access control updates. So like Mr. Hasso said, we have been working with technology, with maintenance, several meetings just to ensure that the ultimate goal is to be able to have that keyless access with those cards in which we can actually manage who is coming in and out of our school sites with the ability to track it. It goes hand in hand with the district-wide badging system that Mr. Parker just briefly spoke about. And continuation, again, thank you for the, approving those SRO agreements. I stand before you and I can tell you that school resource officer program is something that's very effective in the school site, and I always touch on this. Watching the interactions of our SROs with our students on a daily basis is truly amazing. So I think they play a integral part of the school system, and I'm, thankful that they're here and we're continuing to work with them and expand that program. Whether that's Deming PD expansion, Luna County, whether we get, find some alternative measures, that program works and it's working every single day in our school sites. To put things into perspective for you, as of today's numbers, 176 contact hours have been spent by our school resource officers responding to calls for service in our school sites. That equates to about 55 to 60 calls for 2 officers and a deputy from the sheriff's office. So they're staying busy. Like I said, they definitely play a crucial role. Security personnel coverage, we just recently brought on board another security officer over in Red Mountain. Red Mountain is one of our school sites where we do see an increase, an uptick in trend as far as contraband, fights, things like that. So originally, believe it or not, there was about an 800-to-1 ratio for our sole security guard that was there. So he's got some help on board and it's definitely starting to make a difference already. We can see. Raptor Visitor Management System, this is something that's been in place long before my time. It's something we're continuing to grow on. And I know it works because we continue to get calls for accidental activation. So I know the staff knows that they're there and that the system works. Knock on wood, we have not to today's date had any positive hits on that system from the sex offender registry, but we are scanning IDs every day at every school site. Security vestibules and secure points of entry, that's something that was done a little bit prior to my arrival, but we're at the position now where all of our school sites do have a safety and security vestibule, also protecting our office staff as well as controlling access to the site. There's a lot of, and we'll talk more about it as we get into the specifics for the metal detectors and the clear bag policies. There are other measures that are taken internally that we obviously do not release to the public, just based off threat analysis for our school sites that we work internally with our law enforcement partners. But we'll touch more on that as we go. Next slide. So Mr. Parker touched on it as far as kind of some of the stuff that's out goes and kind of where the vision and where we'd like to see the safety and security department in the future. Ultimately, like I said, I think the 50-meter target is the district-wide metal detector and clear bag policy. Again, we'll unpack that a little bit more as we go through, but that's kind of the short range goal. The AI screening software. So this stuff is it's real. It's expensive, but it's real. There's a lot of places here. Mall of America over in Bloomington in Minnesota, they're using that for firearms detection as well as like behavior detection software. as well as a lot of the NFL and sporting events. So there are schools, believe it or not, there are school districts throughout the country that have started to at least demo these AI components. And as of today's, reports, it's nothing but positive results, as we would hope to expect. Another thing we talked about, especially, in the recent events that occurred, are the body worn panic alarm systems. Now, that's a picture there that you guys see on your screen. That's the actual company. They've received thousands of quotes and requests for information ever since the Appalachia shooting. The superintendent for that school district actually made a press release and said that they recommend that system to every school district because of the abilities to prevent the loss of life. That's something that we're starting to kind of look at and see what kind of options are out there. And also kind of exploring what options we have already. We learned recently that there are some systems in place that we have already that we can possibly use to kind of have a similar system. So more to follow on that. Enhanced security guard training. This will kind of tie into what we talked about as far as the metal detectors. We've tried to standardize security guard training across the district. We just recently had our district's insurance provider, Palms and Associates, come in specific for a search and seizure training session with our security guards. Again, tying into more that we'll talk about later, but kind of ensuring that these guys understand the difference between reasonable suspicion, probable cause, what warrants a search, who can search, making sure everybody's, consistent across the board. Safe school zones and community engagement, and just continued community engagement throughout for the department. We want to get more, we want to be transparent. We want to get more feedback as to what parents, most of us are parents in this room. So we want to hear what the community has to say about, where do we take this, safety and security for this district? What things can we be doing better? Ms. Chavez touched on the community input meeting we had. We got some really good feedback, believe it or not. And a lot of those things that came up in that meeting, we're trying to track down now. So it's been good. Next slide. All right, so just to give you kind of a current example of what we got going on, we talked about the 302 incidents in the state of New Mexico. But specifically closer to home here in our district, we have seen an increase in contraband discovery, specifically throughout the district. And I came into this position believing that the majority of our contraband would be found in the high school. And I can tell you that while that is true, there is definitely contraband in the high school. Our elementary schools are no stranger, unfortunately. That top picture you see there is a replica airsoft firearm that was pulled out of one of our elementary schools. Picture below that is just to give you guys kind of an idea of our school resource officers. We call it the stash of vapes. These are a combination of vapes of THC, nicotine, and the unknown. So these have all been pulled out of our school sites. So we're continuing to see an increase, which is obviously a concern for us.
And that's just one SRO stash. And each one of them has a stash about that. I just got a brand new one today from transportation. We couldn't track down the kid because they left it. It either fell out of their backpack or their pocket, but we found it on the bus. It was a pineapple something though. It sounded pretty good.
It's an everyday thing, and bottom line that, these vapes have no place in our school system whatsoever. There are definitely dangers of not just knowing that there's THC, nicotine, but again, the unknown with the fentanyl and the opioid crisis in this country. So again, just kind of underscores why we want to make sure we're taking some steps as a district to prevent this from occurring. And increasing next slide. All right, so to talk about the clear bag policy, I'll be quite honest with you. At our community input meeting, we definitely got some feedback, right, as regarding this, and even in kind of drafting this initial draft policy, we were kind of brainstorming some of the challenges and setbacks. So essentially, clear bag policy is exactly what it is. It would require that every student, and this is eventual, right? It's over the course of a pilot program that we'll discuss, but the idea is that every student would have a clear backpack allowing for a quick inspection of the items inside. This is going to go hand in hand with what we're going to talk about next as far as the metal detectors, but this would give school administrators, security staff, and teachers the ability to very quickly and without being too intrusive, being able to detect if a student has a weapon or other contraband in the school. Again, there's data that says, 30% decrease for schools that have actually done this. So the data shows that it works, and it's, again, so we're talking about a nationwide standard of sporting events from large gatherings, graduations. Again, when you go to a sporting event, a lot of these places aren't even allowing a clear backpack. It's just a clear handbag, right? So it's out there. We talked about some of the setbacks as far as, providing the clear, how does that work, right? What does the fiscal challenges look like if we do provide the badge, or how does that fiscal challenge get passed on to our students' parents? So these are things that we're going to discuss as we go into this. Our idea is an initial pilot program starting off with fall sporting events. So the idea is to be able to, and we'll talk about a timeline, but the idea is to be able to implement this at fall sporting events so that anybody that attends any of our sporting events will be required to, if they want to bring a bag in, it's going to be a clear bag. This pilot program is going to allow us to assess the effectiveness if this is even going to work, right? The feasibility of it, and the challenges. I'll tell you that in something we'll discuss throughout the entirety of this presentation, something that was addressed in this last community input meeting was the privacy of our students. So that's a big concern across the board. So we want to be able to test this program out on a smaller scale, sporting events, see what issues we encounter, and then be able to actually draft something formal for implementation throughout the district, assuming all goes well. Next slide. Now, again, going hand in hand, walk-through metal detectors, the district already does have walk-through metal detectors at the high school. They are not in use, but as of right now, the intention is to be able to provide an additional layer of security. Again, it's not the end all be all. I would be lying to you if I told you that it was going to catch everything that walks in that door. But our idea is a randomized pilot program that allows us to start off at Red Mountain Middle School and Deming High School. And it allows us to randomly, and again, these things are portable and mobile. So based off threat assessments with local law enforcement partners, be able to take these metal detectors, run a pilot program on unannounced dates with, with only school administration being involved. And see what we find, see if we're able to get weapons and contraband out of school sites. I can tell you right now that, when we talk about these walk-through metal detectors, we immediately talk about firearms. I can tell you that at the middle school, they encounter a lot of vapes and things like that students will stuff down their pants in places that obviously we don't want to go. So these combination of walk-through metal detectors and handheld metal detectors, I think is going to do a lot to deter, not only deter, but prevent that contraband from coming in. And also quoted a study up there that shows those 35% reduction in incidents for schools that actually do implement these walk-through metal detectors. Again, there's a lot of moving pieces together. We talked about staffing challenges, how do we staff these metal detectors, the search and seizure, what does the policy look like as far as who's searched. One thing I do want to make clear is the intention of this policy is not to target any specific student or group of students. We've made that clear throughout, the development of this policy. Having our security staff understand when they can search, when they can't search, as well as their administrators. So that way we don't even have the perception that we are targeting students and their rights are still protected. Next slide, please. All right, so we talk about some of our neighbors up north, the Albuquerque Public Schools, as you guys know, is the largest school district here in New Mexico. They actually, in 2020, implemented both a clear bag policy to a certain extent, as well as a metal detector. They saw a 40% decrease. Again, I can't stress enough, the data shows that these are, these pieces that we can, I like to say, fairly easy employ at our level can definitely, make some change. Also quoted some stuff up there as far as like El Paso area, Saleta School District also did the same thing. While they didn't have necessarily specific numbers, staff has stated that, there is definitely a decrease in those numbers. And again, we talked about the nationwide standards. So, some of our larger districts in Las Vegas and Florida, this is, kind of the norm and it's continuing to see good results. So again, these are just continued examples, more data that shows the implementation of these policies will definitely allow us to stay ahead of the curve. And assuming that our threat analysis with our law enforcement partners is on a continuous basis, I think we can do some good work to keep our kids safe. Next slide. We talked about our timeline. Like I said, this is a 60 to 90 day pilot program is what we'd like to see, starting with these upcoming fall sporting events. Obviously starting off with PSAs and our community input meetings. I would imagine with something like this, we're going to have to, we're going to see a lot of town halls and a lot of participation for something like this. So being able to kind of get this out to the community and give them, not only the chance to give us feedback but also present them the data and understand where we're coming from and why we want to do, why these changes even need to occur, right? So again, that's not just community, it's also staff members, administrators getting all their feedback and buy-in before implementing. Again, starting off with the fall sporting event and then based off what happens there, it allow us to refine the policy based off the issues that we encounter. Again, 60 to 90 days phased approach, assuming all goes well. Again, we want to get your feedback, but we would like to see this across the district. Next slide. That's it. I stand for any questions.
Feedback. I'd like to hear from you guys.
Oh, I got a lot of feedback, because my phone didn't stop ringing after you presented. The community is not for the clear bags. I'm gonna be very honest with you. They are not. And I'm gonna say this, because Mr. Orozco brings a really good point. We're hurting the kids that are doing good. We are hurting the kids that are coming to school
trying to do what they want to do. They pick out that backpack, the big red backpack that they love. We're hurting them. And so I'm against that. I'm against hurting the kids that are doing good. And this is what that's doing, because there's a few that decide that they don't want to do good. And so I feel that if we implement stricter, heavy hand situations, especially with the vapes, we will cut it off completely. I'm not saying your ideas of metal detectors and whatnot are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But how many guns have we found here in this community in school? I'm not talking about the airsoft. Obviously, that's an issue. But how many guns have we found here in this community? In the school district? That's what I want to know. How many knives? What has happened? Most kids don't do that here. We are and if they do, we should have a heavy hand on it. I think we're affecting the good kids is what we're doing. A lot of parents called and said they're gonna fight that clear back thing. I think it's wrong personally. We don't live in a community like that. This is a different community. And we're basically turning it into, I don't want to say it like a prison. You're going into a prison. We're already closing everything, all the doors. We're doing all this. It used to not be like that. And so I'm not denying that it's a safety issue. That's not one, but we got to be a little bit more heavy-handed with discipline. I think if we,
I was just gonna ask.
yeah,
how
Mr.
do you-
Roscoe put in a good, he feels that we should just completely expel people that bring in the vapes. Because what I'm hearing, because a lot of parents called me on that. Half the time they get taken away, nothing happens to them. Yeah, go ahead and go, you're good, just throw it away, whatever. And if we would get a little bit, I'm specifically talking about the vapes, if we would get more heavy-handed and say, hey, this is not allowed. You're gonna get suspended, and the second time you're gonna get expelled. And it comes down that's gonna solve a lot of the issues. Your ideas are amazing. I don't deny that half that stuff has happened, but we don't live in Isleta. We don't live in Albuquerque. We live in Deming, New Mexico. And I think it does a disservice for the kids that are doing the right thing. It really does. And then this is another thing. If we decide to implement it, that means that everybody that comes to the stadium has to bring clear bags. We got to get big old huge clear bags to haul the helmets, because if you're going to decide to do this, you might as well do it all the way across. And so then big helmets or whatever they got to haul, they better be clear too. Because how is that fair that the football team, the basketball team, they don't have clear bags, they're just gonna have regular bags. So, and that's was brought to me by a parent. So if you guys are decide you're gonna do this, you better do it all the way across. That means teachers better be bringing clear bags. It's gonna turn into a bigger thing because it's gotta be made fair. And so that's how I feel about it. The metal detectors, we've had them for a while. We've had them over a year or whatever it's been. If they want to implement them, that's fine. I got no issues with it, but we need to have a heavier hand in disciplining the kids that are doing bad. Mr. Orozco has made it very clear. That's the way we're going to solve issues. This is the ex-chief of police. He knows exactly what he's talking about. And so we gotta stop affecting the kids that are doing good. That's what we're doing. We are doing this because of a couple kids that don't want to follow the rules and they want to be wild. And it affects the kids that are doing good. That's how I feel about it. And so unless we start, and we're gonna try to come up with a policy for two things. To deal with the vapes, and this thing right here would probably solve a lot of issues. We're gonna get rid of this in Deming Public Schools. I'm letting you guys know now. We are getting rid of this right here for the kids. There's no more of this. Because I think it would solve a lot of issues. That's what I feel about it. You can have it at home, you can have it at games, but come to what we're supposed to do, which is teach you. There's no room for this. And I bet you a lot of fights are caused right here.
Yes, a lot of bullying.
A lot of
happens.
bullying, a lot of bull stuff is caused right here. And that's what's gonna happen. That's what we're gonna do here. We've already discussed it. That is gonna happen. So the clear thing, I'm just not for it. I really am not. After hearing back from Kim, I wish I didn't get to make the meeting. I was doing some other things. I couldn't believe it. And I just left it alone, and then this is what happened, and that's where I stand with it. So I think if we start eliminating the things that we can control, which is this, and not affecting the kids, that are doing good. Because most of the kids that are doing good, they're not on this, they're doing their work, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
We were at early college on that line.
Yeah.
And they had a board
Yeah.
with pouches. And so every time that student walked into that classroom, they deposited them in that pouch. And so throughout the entire class time, they didn't have access to their phone, so they were more focused on what that teacher was doing.
Yeah.
And we were there doing a presentation, so it was pretty cool to watch. And then when they got ready to leave, they grabbed them and left. I don't know if they went to another class and did the same thing.
Yeah.
But we saw the difference in the students inside the classroom. when they did
It's
that.
been being implemented throughout the state. It's, we're not gonna be the first. There's already other places that have done it.
And
So,
Carter's doing the same thing. They walk in and they have a board they deposited on.
In the morning.
Yeah.
And they leave them there all day.
Yeah, I think,
It's working. It helps those kids focus.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah, I think intermediate's been doing it and I think Red Mountain started doing it this year. The kids already kind of conditioned. Yeah, they're conditioned for it, so they just.
And especially at Red Mountain, because they love the TikTok challenges. And that's when we get busy.
Do the adults put them up to? No, I don't mean to be sarcastic.
No, I'm laughing because no.
But I mean, I think that with that policy though, there has to be some lateral movement for like administrators because you're not always gonna be in a room with a phone and depending on the circumstances, and I cite it from experience that you're gonna be on the fly and you're not gonna be near a line phone, a landline, so you're gonna have to have those cell phones to handle situations, and as things develop, you have to move and keep, moving, so there's gotta be some lateral movement for that kind of stuff when the policy is written, but I mean, that's definitely something that we can, a bridge that we can cross. Any other comments on the backpacks and
I have questions.
go for it.
Why are we not using metal detectors that we have? If they reduce instances by, I think you said 40%, why do we have it and we're not using it?
We ordered them over a year ago and they've been at the high school and just waiting. I know that talking to administration, they wanted to make sure, okay, moving forward, how is this gonna affect us? What do we need to have in place? One of them was, I think, talking to Palms and Associates, how does this affect us? And if we get a lawsuit against us because we are using it, and we needed to know, like Mr. Cadena talked about, we can't target certain groups. If we're gonna implement it, we have to open it up, and everybody has to walk through that.
That's right.
The biggest issue was, and another issue, I should say, was manpower. So it doesn't do you any good to have the detector in place, the lights go off if there's not a security guard or an administrator there to be able to take care of that issue. I mean, because it's going off for a reason. What is it? Is it keys, a phone, a vape, a weapon? And so somebody has to be there monitoring. So that was one of the issues that I know the high school was exploring. How do we man those and make sure that we can cover, if we're having detections.
I guess it just seems to me like we're jumping the gun a little bit. Presenting today a policy, having the community input meeting not that long ago when we have an opportunity to use the metal detectors that we've had for a year or however long it's been. And there's still things that need to be worked out. It just seems like we're not making very good use of our resources that we already have, that we could have already implemented some sort of a pilot for those. And my other question along those same lines is, if we had metal detectors, then why would we need clear bags too?
I can speak a little bit to both of those, as a Roscoe coordinator. So one of the things that I came when I took this position and was overseeing safety, kind of did just a site audit. It's kind of one of your normal policies that you do. One of the things I saw was the metal detectors kind of there on the side. So I was trying to ask exactly how that is. Mr. Hassel is absolutely correct. Part of it was the implementation piece and it not scaled out. 2 metal detectors is not large enough, not nearly enough that we would need for a full scale implementation, not only for our activities, but definitely for something in the size of the high school. Those would probably work about the size of maybe an elementary school, maybe like Bell, 200, 250, to be able to kind of be efficient with that. So that's part of that. The other component that comes along with that is not a funding source in order to add more. Currently, we do have some safety monies that were awarded to us. The 23, I think there was some capital money that was given. So that's the same money that we're using to improve and expand on our access controls and our security cameras. So we can use that money to buy additional metal detectors to do that. And that's kind of where we wanted to see where the board was in the community on expanding on that, because that would be an investment. My initial guess is we need about another 13 more to cover all of our secondaries. So we have all the points of entry into the district or into those buildings can be covered by metal detectors and as well as by site personnel. The clear bag helps expedite the entry into the building. If you walk through the metal detector and you have your laptop, for example, in your bag, you're gonna set it off. If you put it on the carousel or whatever you need to slide it on, one of two things needs to happen. Either that bag is not inspected because it just goes through, or security guard or some other staff would have to open that to look at what's inside as a screen or piece. And that student or whoever employees as well have looked at models also that happen in larger districts, urban districts. Every single person goes through that. I visited one school in Philadelphia. The superintendent goes through that every single time they visit. All of us, when we went through and we looked at it, everybody looks and visit. Yeah, that's just part of the culture of that. It's part of the change in behavior for the adults. The clear bag would allow that student or adult put their bag down. It's careful, it's just visually inspected, stripped and back, go over, they walk through, they go throughout their business. And that's why we wanted to pair the two, especially when we were looking at the school sites. At games, it would be a little bit different. They would have to do that. They would probably put it up out there. It's just the site visual inspection and walking through those as well. At the school level, because we have a lot of kids coming in all at once and they need to get into the building because that's also a safety issue where you don't want them to congregate trying to funnel into that. So we needed to have enough metal detectors in the process where that clear bag could go through, visually inspected, and then that student walks all the way through. If they have to go through a secondary because it keeps triggering, we're not gonna pat down kids in front of anybody that's not of that, but we have a wand. Sometimes it's a belt buckle, sometimes it's something like that. We can adjust sensitivity to those, but being aware that the metal detectors are really for large scale weapons. We tested the one that's out here. It will pick up a weapon like a gun or a law enforcement walk through it. We went all the way down to some vapes and even down to a pair of scissors. It would pick up stuck in somebody's booth. Beyond that, it gets a little sketchy, but really what we're looking at is mitigating the threats that come in through the building. Whether it be a gun, simulated weapon, scissors, large knives and things like that, all that we have had. We have had several knives that have been taken. We've had a report of a weapon on campus, and I know Mr. Lozano can talk about that, specifically a handgun. So it does happen in Deming. We have had a history of that, where to have a student lose their life with a student in 2001, I believe, did come in with a weapon and killed a young lady. So we do have a history.
Prior to that, we had
Prior
a
to
principal take a gun away from another girl and go back.
So there are elements of that. We don't really talk a lot about those different components for privacy reasons. For that, we don't want to create an alarming culture, but we do want to make sure that it is out there and these are things that are happening in our schools every single day.
I also want to add, I was trying to remember why we only had 2 metal detectors and the SROs wrote a grant a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, because they wanted to pilot like at graduation. It was we never made the investment to say this is the direction we want to go as a district. It was something that the SRO said, can we do this? And we said, yes, we would support you in that process.
But then we just never used them.
They've used them for off things, but it has never been fully,
They've never been fully implemented.
no.
They can't. So with all the entrances that the high school operates on a daily basis, I mean, they have student parking, they have bus drop off, you have drop off in the mornings. I mean, I know of 3 for sure. I don't know how many others you.
No, we cut it down to 2, but, with us, and I'm sure we can figure this out logistically, because I'm in favor of metal detectors just because of an increase in vapes. I mean, now they're clogging up the bathrooms, so if we keep the same track, nothing's gonna change. But whenever, just to clarify, anytime we've caught anybody with a vape, they get suspended, we're calling SROs. But when we leave it up to them, I mean, it's out of our hand whether they press charges or not, but we call them and they go to the officer's resource room with the parent. And after that, if they press charges, I'm not sure what's going on. There's some where I talk to the SRO and they do, depending on the level. But what's funny is that not a lot of them are repeaters yet. Like today I caught one and called SRO. It was his first time, sophomore. never would have guessed that he was a vapor, but he is. But that's the thing that we say, if it's the second or third time, we can escalate it. I don't know about expulsion for a year or anything like that, but it is progressive where it goes from 1 to 3 days suspension and then it goes to 5 and then it goes to long term, but it is rare that we catch anybody more than twice. The ones I've caught this year has only been once. But the metal detectors are picking up those vapes, and that's what I'm kind of like trying to target because there's so many of them and it's such a variety of kids. I mean, let's talk weapons. The kid that we caught with a handgun in his backpack was a student athlete in about 2018, 17. And that was from a report from another student where he had pulled it out the day before in the hallway and pointed at another student. And then about 2 years ago, 2 years ago at Red Mountain, after hours, we got a report that what looked like a student was at Sonic with a handgun in his lap. Well, it turned out it was one of our students. Called the parent said, no, it's in a safe. Parent called back about 2 hours later on my cell phone and says he took it out of the safe. We don't know when. And that was that. So, I mean, there is recent ones. I think the biggest thing for us is I do appreciate safety being proactive. Because a lot of times what happens in communities and what we see nationwide is everything's reactive. It's after the fact that's easy to change things because then you have something to base it on. But I love the idea of safety before and trying things. I don't know about the clear backpack too. I haven't given that much thought. I don't know how that would work. But I am in favor of the metal detector for the high school, but just the logistics. Just scanning IDs, we learned that one ID scanner with backtracking, you think about 600 kids walking through the back, you delay that by 10 seconds. I can only imagine a metal detector, how much more of a delay, but I'm in favor of trying something new, even as a deterrent, because the kids know that those are being picked up and also with a handheld. Yesterday, we caught one with a marijuana pipe. It's rare, we never see a lot with the marijuana pipe. He was walking funny, he was in a stall that had already been broken and clogged up. He had it right here wrapped up. Security was able to pin it on here. It had residue. It was a black one. It was a kid that had just been suspended the week before for destroying one of our stalls. And luckily we were tracking him. So we had every teacher call us when he went to the bathroom and that's how we found him. But something like that takes so much resource. Like it took all 7 teachers. It took 2 administrators, 2 security guards to track him all day, but it worked out. But just to do it on a large scale, a deterrent and proactive approach does help. But so I do appreciate that, but we're just standing still to see what comes out of that, because we do want to try something different for that.
Well, and that's the kind of thought process behind the vapes is that we're spending too dang much time trying to investigate where the heck the vape is. In the meantime, the classroom's suffering, the kids are suffering, the teachers are suffering because why are we investigating a vape? Why not move to a situation where we get heavy-handed, be done with it, and then maybe we scale it back a year or 2 from now, be like, okay, it worked, we're not seeing those incidents anymore, we'll scale it back. You get caught with one, maybe we'll do a few days suspension. But if you look at the man hours or just the employee hours that are being spent, okay, this kid's got it. And how many times does that one vape change hands? You bring in 7 kids and, oh, I gave it, this one gave it to this one gave it to this one, and then another 10 kids later, you finally recover the vape, but at what cost? And what could you have done during those times? If that makes sense. That's kind of my mindset in that respect. The clear backpack thing, I can see it's a preventative measure. It's not so much, it's more of a limiting the possibilities more so than anything else, because you take just violence across the world and you look at, you have countries that they've reduced weapons or firearms. Okay, well then you have people that are stabbing people and, inflict that. So if there's a will, there's a way. And I don't mean that negatively, but if you try to limit those types of situations, I think it's for the betterment of everybody in those cases. And yeah, we want to be able to stay small and not have to deal with some of those situations. And so it's tough. It's tough no matter which decision gets made. And we want to protect our kids. And I've read up to the board and they're probably tired of hearing me, but I think we've lost sight of the kids that come to school every day and don't cause a problem. We've lost sight of them. We let them go because they're equivalent to being on simmer and they're not causing any problems. And so we gotta go track down a vape that 7 kids have had. We gotta go figure out who broke the seat on the bus. And that's not fair to the kids that are there, that are here every day and wanting to be that productive member of society. I'm not saying that any of our kids aren't productive members of society. All I'm saying is that we're spending so much time, we're focusing so much energy and effort on things that I feel should be focused on in other areas.
Would it be appropriate, the board could give us some feedback to explore this and survey the community? I mean, should we have
Survey the
town
kids.
halls and really ask about metal detectors and clear bag? Obviously, it's a much simpler implementation that follows what Spruceton does for activities events. We could definitely do that, but if we're looking at the school, we could put as much effort into this as we need to, so we have enough input on that. Because we also have heard on the other hand is like, yeah, it feels a little intrusive, but maybe this isn't just where we need to be. And I've heard that comment as well, but those are few voices out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of kids and families we have. So we could look at that. We could host town hall, we could do surveys with the community, we could do all those different components to get an actual beat of how they would feel.
Have you guys pulled the kids? I mean, at the secondary levels, what are those kids? Oh,
We could, we have not polled the kids,
I mean,
not an
just to-
official poll.
Yeah.
There definitely
Just-
needs to be more community input than just the
Sure.
one community input meeting where,
Sure.
truthfully, if you looked at the agenda for that meeting, I had no idea that clear bag policy was gonna be talked about
Sure.
at all. I was caught off guard. So you might have had a bigger turnout if everybody actually knew that was going to be a topic.
It was
same-
intended to be an initial topic, not the one and only
Yeah.
presentation.
So, I mean, I think that I can see how clear bags, it just seems like, I know you said that it would just change the culture, but think about how that makes kids feel. You know, kids look forward to picking their backpack. It's kind of a creativity thing. People want to have some sense of privacy and some
You-
sense of self
You need,
in the bag that they're carrying, like, what about the cost? What about the fact that these plastic bags don't last? They're kind of cheaply made, the cheaper ones.
There are variations of that. I know that they're, just like regular backpack. Trying to buy a $7 backpack at some place that's not gonna last you, spend $50-$60 on a specific type of that. Some of the clear backpacks are very similar depending on the thickness of the plastic, that have been used in, like for Coast Guard and different things like that, heavy duty military applications, they just happen to be clear, not camo or digital pattern. So those things we could definitely solve, but I guess what we're trying to look at, is there an appetite from this board to explore that with the community? That's really what we're trying to do. And if there's not, then, we can explore other measures and things. That's really what we're trying to figure out.
I mean, I think it goes to what Mr. Orozco said about where there's a will, there's a way. If a kid's gonna bring a vape, they're just gonna put it in their pocket.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be in their pants, it's gonna be in a sock, it's gonna be in a bra.
And the guns the same way.
Guns are small enough that if they really wanna do it, they're gonna find a way. And I mean, I'm all for, gauging the feeling of the community, the parents, the students who are going to be subject to this on a regular basis.
This is an
And
alarming conversation. I was with a student, if you could ask, how prevalent are guns in a high school? So at any given time, there's probably about 2 guns on campus.
you asked one student?
Mhm.
And this is for Deming High?
And it's pretty consistent.
And do you know if the kids with the firearms were keeping them in their purse or a pocket or
Well,
their pants?
they don't say that on campus, could be in vehicles. I mean,
Yeah, and
Are
that
we
doesn't
gonna-
eliminate that.
It doesn't, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. We're gonna start using clear shirts and clear pants. There's gotta be a limit of what we're gonna do. If Mr. Lozano loves the metal detector idea, well, then put it, I'm not against the metal
I'm
detectors,
all for them.
but I'm 100% for safety. Don't get me wrong, but there's a limit. We don't live in prison. And this is a school where we learn. And guess what? If we're not doing our jobs, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
We're not at an event, we're not at a Cowboys game, we're not where we're gonna go do that. This is school, this is something personal.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting away from it. We gotta get heavy handed. It comes down to, and I know a lot of people don't do that. It's gonna bring I've heard that the numbers are gonna come down, but guess what? It's gonna show this, we're not gonna put up with it no more. This is what's gonna happen if you get caught. And the same thing with the air rifles. If we're having a problem with that, suspension, and then that's it. The parents know the next time you're expelled and you cannot come to Deming Public Schools. Maybe that program that you had mentioned about doing it online, maybe they're gonna have to go to Deming Public Schools online.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? It comes down, that means they get away from their friends, they get away from everybody. So there might have to be a combination of everything, but he brought another point. We can't even scan people coming in.
Right.
With their little cards. How are we gonna start getting wands and then going through the metal detector I mean, we just went through a Chihuahuas game. It took a while to get through there and they had plenty of openings. So not only do they have to go through the scanner, but then you gotta scan your card and you gotta do this. It adds that burden. So unless we're gonna hire a bunch of people to do that, we gotta start thinking beyond that, if that's what we're gonna do.
I mean, yeah, I think we should poll the community or at least have a couple more.
The only thing when we do the
meetings
polls,
just to see what
make
they
sure
say.
people can make a comment at the end, because a lot of people have told me that's cool, the true, but people sometimes want to say something. So make sure that they can say something, 150, whatever they want to say, just like a text message or something.
Yeah.
I think if we, for all of the surveys that we do now, people want to comment on some of them surveys.
Mr. Sainz, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to say that we need to continue looking at safety, because I got here in 1992 as a teacher. We opened Hope back in the first 2 years, we found 3 guns. One of the kids that did bring a gun was kicked out of den. Him and his family, they did, and that probably had to do with one of the judges that took care of it. But along that, there was a big gang. And lately I've seen a lot of the gang stuff going around Denver where kids are crossing out monikers of other kids. And I know I'm not in the schools, but I see it as I'm driving around all the different schools. Somewhere I'm seeing some graffiti of gang monitors and stuff like that. That took us from 92 until 99 when we brought in the boot camps.
Right.
And again, those kids even then, we're still, hiding it somewhere somehow. But it's just something that we gotta stay on. It's not something we need to just say, it's going good, let's not talk about it. It's something that we need to continue. I really, think that the
Metal detectors?
he is gonna find something that gets through it. It's gonna, and that makes a safe day. But I'm telling you, I lived through it. I taught those students when I was at the detention center, and just listening to their stories. Kids are not dumb. Those kids are smart kids. But at the same time, some of them, were taken out of the schools. And at the same time, they were also vandalizing homes and all of that. So we need to be very, very united, not only with the schools, but with the city and the county to come together and see what we can do to get rid of this, because I'm starting to see that again. I know, Mr. Orozco, you opened, Hope back here and we had a lot of good kids, but you're right, there's a couple of kids that didn't come to school for that reason. They didn't have, and luckily we had teachers that didn't see it in a purse and they left it open because of those.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Mr. Lozano, you had something?
I was just gonna say I'm gonna be completely transparent. I don't know if I believe on a one strike you're out, but that your idea on online resonated with me because that I caught today. We look at everything. We look at academics, everything. Kid has suspended, but I said, you're a sophomore. I said, maybe online is better for you because he said, I just don't want to be here at school. He said, he goes, I vape for myself. My mom knows it. Mom got there. And I said, well, maybe instead of getting a criminal at this stage, I said, because not having I said, maybe online's for you. I said, think about it. If we have any open slots when it does open, I said, come back and talk to me. And I said, and it gives you that time to think about it for a year. Maybe you get your GD or maybe you decide the work is not for you and you end up coming back after a year. But something like that, I don't see how anybody would be opposed to giving a kid an opportunity still to continue learning, but maybe not in a facility, because I'm with you, I have two children, I have two boys at high school. They don't want to go to the bathroom, like they tell me, they got upset because
A lot of people told me that about my mom.
mirror. So we took the mirrors out of the bathrooms and the girls are upset. And I get it, but I'm not gonna have somebody slice their hand open because they get in a fight but it's punishing other kids, but it is something that seems to be getting worse in the bathrooms now that I've seen in the last 8 years that I've been an administrator, but.
And you don't want to put a hall monitor in the bathrooms, because when we went to school, you can't have somebody in there just standing in there.
Yeah, so what's happening, yeah, you could literally have somebody, what's the difference between our old bathrooms and these bathrooms, there's double doors. So the kids literally stand on the first double door, so by the time we open it, we just see the smell, right? So, but the security is catching them in between passing periods. We've already told teachers to go in there and get them out, and that's how we've been catching more of them. But it's just such a huge school at any given point, whether it's in the cafeteria or in the hallway. I mean, during lunch, we've kicked kids out of the hallway. That way they don't have to monitor that. It's just in the cafeteria during lunches. But I mean, the double doors is a big thing. I don't know why it was designed that way. So it really protects from sound and really from us entering in quickly because of the double doors.
Privacy, I'm getting,
Yeah.
because you open the first door.
But other bathrooms.
But there's lots of bathrooms that were designed to just
Yeah.
walk in and around, yeah.
One thought we had was changing the hinges so they open to cover the stalls, because our other bathrooms, staff bathrooms are single doors. The bathrooms at some of the Hope back are single doors, so no. You can't,
X doesn't have mirrors.
you can't change the hinges.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
They should have been designed different from the beginning,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ms. Mack?
So I just want to give maybe an elementary perspective. Last year, we had a parent bring a gun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's no longer allowed, but yeah. And so we also deal with kids sneaking stuff, kinder, first, second, third. They sneak stuff in their backpacks. We've had babies. We've had, just stuff that you want the kids to be there to learn, but they're bringing stuff from home that impedes that. They're sneaking everything they can imagine in their backpack. So would I mind a clear bag policy? No. Because if they're sitting there playing with everything they bring from home, they're sitting there, getting out the Cheetos that their parents are like, oh no, they can take them if they want. It impedes the learning just as much as turning them off from not being able to get their cool backpack. Then they're bullying each other for the kid who doesn't have the cool backpack. And the kid who, is bringing last year's stuff with the straps broken. And so maybe it starts there.
Yeah.
Because the parents are enabling that to happen as well.
Yeah.
I actually had a kindergartner bring a knife in their backpack
I've had a
and
lot of them.
took off after kids on the playground when I was a principal. So
Yeah.
it is a real thing that happens for sure.
And please, for me, as far as I can't speak for the entire board, but for me, the comments and stuff that I talk about, it's nothing against anybody. It's just the feelings that I have, the experiences that I've seen in my lifetime, growing up here, going through the schools, working in the job that I've worked, that I continue to work in. And so it's just my own feelings, but it's nothing against anybody. And please don't think that I try to downplay anybody else's opinions or values when it comes to these conversations, but it's good that we have them. I think that's how we can resolve issues. You know, we can definitely put it on the table and talk about it and find a resolution, you know, because it's when it ultimately comes down to the kids that we service on a daily basis. That's what it comes down to.
Well, I really appreciate that, because in doing some of the research on this, every community is different. And to hear it is like, well, I'm okay with the metal detectors, but not the bag. Most of them is like, I'm okay with bags, but not the metal detectors. So it's interesting to kind of see that pivot and that perspective on that. So we'll continue to dig in and continue to get some more feedback on that and present that data to you as it comes. So whether it's through survey and be able to allow some kind of input, or yes, I'm for it, but what about these things? Because that's kind of like the parent input that we had with the last meeting is like, yeah, I'm for it, but I want careful consideration to some things for privacy, some things regarding students who may request an accommodation, other ways and other measures that we can do for students that have certain things that we need to address. So we can dig into that and bring some more information.
Thank you. Any other comments?
The good thing is that we are talking about it.
That's right.
But I mean, we'll get to the action, but at least we're having a great conversation, a good conversation about and making us think, and hopefully the great minds here and others too can come to some kind of solution so that we never have a child or an adult get into a situation, heaven forbid.
When I work with my team or anybody else, we're talking about Mary and the goal. The goal is to ensure that we've done everything we can to make
Right.
sure students
Mhm.
are as safe as they possibly can.
That's right.
How we get there?
Lots of ways.
That's a unified decision.
That's a lot.
So we're married to that goal. We're on the same page with everybody.
Right.
But how we get there, that is a community message.
100%.
Nielsen?
Thank you.
You guys.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate
Thank you.
your,
No, it's-
Yeah, thank
we
you.
appreciate your presentation. That was really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
On to item C.
Yes,
9P.
so, Mr. President, members of the board, Member Crumley asked that we include language from our previous nepotism policy into the staff conflict of interest policy. And so this is just a first read. It is word for word from how the policy read in the past. And we'll be happy to take any feedback, questions, comments related to the additional language.
What is your opinion about bringing this back?
I don't see anything wrong with it at all. It's a practice for sure, and that's actually where we were going to place it, but when you we were just gonna stick it in regulation. But when you said, I think this is something we need to consider, I don't see it not fitting in policy either, but it definitely would be a regulation if you didn't want it in policy.
So we need the verbiage of chief administrator, or is that, do we just put principal or designee? Chief administrator. Well, we don't have that anywhere in the district, do we, as far as?
No.
That's just a suggestion, I'm just putting on the table.
I think it's probably director would be a more appropriate word for that, so.
Would the district interpret this to also include like step parents?
It doesn't speak to that specifically. We could, it would have to, I would say, because I mean, a father or a stepfather is still that's the same in my eyes. Do you guys see it that way as well?
I don't know, I
I would see it the same.
wondered.
I would see it the same.
How would you, I mean, I think it should be step
Yeah.
is inclusive of that.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
so.
you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Do you want that language defined
No,
here?
not necessarily. I
Okay.
just-
And that's the same definition that's used for a lot of like FMLA and things like
Yeah.
that, so. We can add it if you need it.
Well, or the other is, trying to think of the word, I'm trying to think. A person who is, I just can't think of the word, it's just not coming out to me, but I know what I want to say, that's in charge, that's not supervising, but I'll think of it.
Evaluate? Evaluate?
No, someone that's taking care of another
Kind of like a guardian?
guardian, thank you. I could not come to it. My brain's really smart, working today.
So I'm not sure that that's necessarily necessary because a guardian means that they're under the age of 18 and that wouldn't apply.
Well, that's
We're not
true.
hiring
That is true.
people like that.
I wasn't thinking,
Yeah,
I was just,
yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good, maybe that's the reason I wasn't being allowed to say the word.
All right, any other comments by the board? If not, we'll move on to announcements. Any board member requests for agenda items?
I would like to continue the discussion about vapes some more.
Okay.
I think President Orozco has asked for that before, and I don't remember having a detailed conversation about it. I'd like to know, things off the top of my head, like specific numbers as far as
Okay.
how many vapes are we talking about? What grade levels? What's the outcome? That sort of thing.
Okay.
And so that maybe if the board does need to have a further discussion about implementing policy to address the issue, then we can have time to
The
talk
data
about it.
and the
Yeah.
data. Sure.
And then I'd also like to just add as a discussion only about cell phones in schools. Because I think the high school has a policy regarding cell phones, but I don't know that it's actually enforced. So I think a discussion about that is probably a good idea.
Anything else?
I want to ask a question. Most elementary schools, they don't allow you don't have a cell phone in there, do you, or?
Kids in elementary schools take
They
cell
do?
phones,
They have
yes.
cell phones, they have
Gizmos.
smartwatches.
Yeah.
They call their parents on their watch. Yeah.
Some of them have two, because the mom and dad aren't together anymore, so each one of them provides them with one protection.
Golly.
In fact, last year, PD came very surprised because a kid had been trying to text and it dialed 911. And they came to the school and we had to go through each room to find who had their cell phone.
Would it be appropriate to just make a statement so people don't think that we did something after this meeting? So yesterday in our PAC meeting, one of the things that was on the agenda was the high school, we did a survey for teachers, because we have the cell phone procedure, like if you have it out once, the teacher takes it for the period and then you take it out for the rest of the day. It's always been inconsistent depending on what teacher you talk to. So we did a survey. We got it from early college and charters where they were doing the pockets, and all our teachers use the pockets. So I did a survey, how many would want pockets, and I put a picture of how many would want safe, which is a counter safe with 30 slots, and they put it in locks. It was about half and half. So we did order 40 of each, and they should be coming within the next couple of weeks. So in the PAC meeting, I asked the parents if that's something they were willing to accept or something that they'd be in favor of, given the same procedure, but it reads it's uniform for the school, and we got positive response. So once we get it, we are going to implement it, and we're going to talk to the students. We're not going to search students. Obviously, if they go into a classroom, if you don't put your phone there, we're not going to search you, but if at any point you take it out, then that's the procedure that follows. I think teachers are just scared to follow the individual policy in each individual room, but the survey kind of stated that if it was unified, it seems like they have more backup because everybody's doing the same thing, whether it's the pockets or the locker. So I just wanted to say that because for next meeting, if that's something that's already talked to the kids and see if we get any pushback from them.
Well, and I think that uniformity kind of goes a little bit further because they're starting in sixth grade and the kids know that sixth grade now, seventh and eighth are starting it. So by ninth, you should probably be seeing those kids next year. And they should probably be following that same trend. If you stick to that same trend, it'd probably be a lot easier because they've already had a couple of years of understanding that they can't have them out.
And Mr. Richmond said that they had success, so we're like, we might as well do it. If the middle school kids can control that, then the high school
can too.
I mean, we didn't have it when we went to school.
Right.
No.
I'm totally against it. I feel it should be stayed at home or in your pocket. I don't have an issue if the kid keeps it in his pocket. He gets caught, it's done. The cell phone's gone. So, I mean, that has nothing.
Get a hold of my child.
Yeah, and you know what? We have.
There's no phones at the school.
Yeah. We used to get a hold of people when we were at the school. They called the front office and they took care of it. I mean,
We have phones in every classroom.
yeah, so it's.
Yeah, in every office.
And they talk about the safety issue and what if this happens? Well, guess what? We have safety, we have a lot of things going on. There's people that.
And a lot of the bullying we deal with starts on cell phones at home.
Or even just texting to go meet and vape or do
Right,
whatever.
right.
It's not learning. We're not here to be a social thing. We're here to teach people. Teach kids.
And
That's
the
how I feel about it.
purpose, the original purpose of bringing
I'm
files.
pushing it, guys. I'm telling you, I don't, we need to teach kids. We're not here to do social stuff. We're gonna I'm gonna try to push it to get rid of them, so. I know people are not gonna like me, but I don't really care, so.
Be continued, right?
Yes.
Should be not on the agenda.
Anything else? Okay. If not, the next regular meeting will be held October 17th, 2024 at 5:30. The meeting will be held at the Emmett Shockley Administration Building in Deming. So, and then with that, we'll adjourn meeting and move into closed session. Can I have a motion for that?
Also move that we adjourn our meeting, moving to closed section. Do we need to read all that?
Yes.
Closed session. Closed executive session will allow for the board and the superintendent to discuss the following as authorized by the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. The discussion of limited personnel matters to include the discussion of the superintendent evaluation tool, section 10-15-1H2. The discussion of personally identifiable information about individual students, section 10-15-1H4. The discussion of threatened or pending litigation, section 10-15-1H7. Do I read the last one?
Yes.
And there will be no action as a result of closed executive session.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Crowe?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron.
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe.